Is it rather pointless calling for that?
No, it's never pointless. Surely, anything that brings about a cessation of the use of chemical weapons moves us nearer, if not totally to, a ceasefire and a reopening of the Geneva talks has got to be the right way forward. Surely, we cannot
it's the right way forward, but there's hoping for something, isn't there? And there's a strategy to, and I understand the intention to try and get a peaceful solution, but it does seem as if that has been blocked time and again by the Russians.
Well, Security Council members do block each other's motions. Russia and America have form on this going back ever since the UN, since the UN was founded. Surely,
but they're blocking. Russia's blocking the motion that you're calling for. Do you think that they are undermining the legitimacy of the UN by doing that?
Well, undermining the legitimacy of the UN, it's part of the UN Constitution that there is a veto procedure of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. That is there. So therefore the legitimacy of the UN still exists, but it clearly has always been a historic problem for the UN, the ability for the 5 permanent members to veto resolutions. But the UN is there, the UN does have a role, and go back to 2013, 5 years ago, there was an agreement between Lavrov and Kerry which did move things along quite a bit. We did then move into the Geneva talks phase. The disaster is that the war has reignited. The danger is that in the horrors of what's happened at Douma, the war ends up escalating.
Part of that agreement was that Syria was going to get rid of its chemical weapons. Now that doesn't seem to have happened, does it?
Well, part of the agreement was that they be removed and destroyed, and indeed large numbers of them were. Clearly there are chemical weapons still in Syria, so obviously, and this appears to be chlorine that was used, which was not, as I understand it, destroyed in 2013 because it wasn't there at the time.
If it's proven to be used by the Syrian government, would you then back the authorisation of some form of military action against the government?
I think you have to be sure of where you are first. You then have to ensure there's a process for the removal of those weapons, and using all the 12 countries that are now involved in the war in Syria, using all of them to put that pressure on the Syrian government to make a ceasefire and remove those weapons. The danger at the moment is if we go in with targeted or massive bombardment, further civilians will die, further chaos will be caused, and the war will escalate still further. This is a time, surely, when we have to use all the authority we have to prevent a continuation and escalation of the war.
Are there circumstances in which you would back military action in Syria?
Well, let's cross that bridge when we get there. My position is, let's do everything we can to stop the war at the present time. An escalation of the war is in nobody's interests. Too many, hundreds of thousands of wholly innocent civilians have been killed in this war. Millions are now in exile. It's the biggest refugee crisis the world has seen since the Second World War.
Let's speak to Jason. Jason, it seems as though Mr Corbyn thinks there is definitely still room for dialogue before military action.
He does. He's aware that Russia has repeatedly blocked resolutions that have been put forward on 12 occasions since the war began to intervene in Syria to condemn actions by the Syrian government blocked by Russia. And the resolution that he is calling for, he's saying that there should be a UN investigation into the most recent attack in Douma of chemical weapons. That again was blocked by Russia, but he's saying that both sides have been involved in blocking, and his message to Russia, but it is diluted by, he's also making the same message to the United States and others, is stop blocking resolutions, get on with a kind of like an agreement, a formed agreement, and he's very much of the view that this can be done through the United Nations. Obviously the problem with that is all evidence suggests that that just hasn't happened so far, but he can't see any advantage in a military strike at this stage. I also put to him this idea put about by the Russian ambassador that maybe this was fabricated, that maybe others had actually staged this chemical attack. Or maybe it wasn't even a chemical attack. Maybe it had all been put on. And he wasn't too